Almost, so I want interaction with you guys. I won't stand up here and tell you too much about myself, but I'm really excited to be here. And it's so funny because looking around the room with all these Apple computers, it looks like a commercial for Apple. We didn't even have laptops when I was in school. I used to have to go to Shrine and use a computer lab. So you guys are really fortunate with the technology because it allows you to do so much in this day and age. But to tell you a little bit about myself, I started at Syracuse, originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and I started at Syracuse in 1989. I lived in Haven Hall for 3 years, believe it or not. Everybody's usually rushing to get off of campus after their second year, but I decided to stay at Haven. I was able to get a single room, so I was excited. And I majored in television, radio, and film. When I came to the university, I wasn't a part of the Newhouse School. Back then, you could take a test and actually try to get in, the next semester. So I was accepted into VPA, but I knew I really wanted to go into either music or broadcast journalism or something. So I studied really hard, took the test, got into Newhouse my sophomore year, majored in television, radio, and film, and I got involved early on while I was a student on campus. I was a DJ at Z89. I had the graveyard shift. I was on from like 2 to 4 in the morning. I was also the assistant promotions director. I wrote for a little campus newsletter we had called The Happenings. And I used to actually pick up the phone and just call record companies cold and ask for music. I told them I had a hip-hop show, and then I also worked at the campus station. So they would send me music, and I would critique the CDs. I was a part of the Ambassador 100 program. I gave campus tours. I also volunteered at a community center here, because when I was at SU, it was a weird relationship between the people that lived in the city of Syracuse versus the students on campus. And so I wanted to make sure that I was giving back to the community that I was a part of. So I volunteered my time at the community center here, which was really fulfilling because a lot of the kids really didn't have nuclear families and they didn't have any positive role models around them. So a lot of my friends on campus, we would go down there and hang out with the students. And so I encourage you as students to reach back and give back, because that's really important. You guys are very fortunate and blessed in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of people that aren't as fortunate out there. So make sure that you start doing that kind of stuff while you're young. I actually got my first shot in the music industry while I was a student at SU. I was really aggressive and all over the place, and I was like the queen of networking, so I was always constantly trying to meet people. So being from Atlanta, there were a lot of music industry conventions that were starting to take place down there, like Jack the Rapper. I don't know if you've ever heard of those kind of conventions, but they were largely popular in the late 80s and early 90s. And so I remember going up to Russell Simmons one day, and I was like, "You don't know me, but by the end of this conference, you will." And so I went to every panel that he was on and stood up and asked questions. I wasn't afraid to ask whether they were dumb questions or not, because you just can't be afraid to go in and ask questions, because that's how you get noticed. So by the time the end of the conference rolled around, I went back up and stood in front of him, and I was like, "So what do you think?" He was like, "I'm really impressed, like you're doing your thing." And that was like hitting the lotto for me, because for Russell Simmons to actually acknowledge me, he probably doesn't even remember that now, but for him to actually acknowledge my hard work and dedication and saw how I was really trying to network and meet a lot of people already in the business, did a lot just to boost my enthusiasm and my confidence as someone trying to make it in the music industry. Also, there were some folks there that I knew that worked at Capitol Records, so I knew that I wanted to intern or do something when I went back home, and a position became available at Capitol Records. It was 1991, the summer after my sophomore year, so I went back home, and it's funny because back then the Arsenio Hall show was really popular, and I had gotten accepted at the Arsenio Hall show as an intern, but it was in Los Angeles. And so I'm from Atlanta, love my mom, but she's really country. And she was like, "You can't go all the way out to California. We don't have family there. What are you going to do?" So she shot that down. And so I was devastated and broke out my phone book and started calling other people that I knew in Atlanta to figure out what I was going to do that summer. So I ended up getting a job at Capitol because the young lady that was working at the time as a promotions assistant, she had to go on maternity leave. So they hired me, and I think MC Hammer was on the label then, Mantronics, all these old school groups. But I took that shot, and I wanted to make the best of that moment. And I would like to think I did a great job. And I actually ended up getting paid, so I was fortunate. So I started interning, but then before the summer was out, they actually started paying me on a weekly salary. And so I did a good job there. And the summer after my junior year, they called me back. So I was at Capitol for a second term and worked that entire summer. Came back on campus, doing the Z89 thing, continuing to network. I just did anything and everything I could to meet a lot of folks. And so at one of the conferences, I met a guy who worked for Uptown Records, and he called me and he said, Mary J. Blige and Jodeci are having this boat ride in New York City. Can you get here? Well, I was broke back then. I had a work-study job working at the front desk at Haven, making like $40 a week. And so I had saved some money, and I took, because I don't know how many of you people from Manhattan, but normally it's like, what, a 3-hour drive from here to Manhattan, maybe? 4, okay. Well, I took Greyhound because I didn't have a car, but it ended up being like a 7 or 8 hour trip on Greyhound. I went down, networked, met some folks, got to meet Puffy that night, and so I was, again, increasing my Rolodex and networking. Slept on my friend's hotel floor, got up at 6 a.m., took the bus back, and was back in time for class. And so that's how hard I was hustling back then, because I knew I wanted to really, really make it in the entertainment industry. So came back to school, did a lot, and after I graduated in 1993, I got my start at LaFayette. Well, I forgot. I interned at Sony Music on the sales side, and so I did that for 4 months. And it's all about networking, right, and not burning bridges and staying in touch with people. So the same guy that hired me at Capitol had actually, I don't know if he got laid off, but I think he was a part of some layoffs, but he began consulting with L.A. Reid and Babyface because they had recently set up shop in Atlanta. They were about to release the Boomerang soundtrack and had a lot going on down there. He said, guess what? They need a promotions director. They need somebody to really help, you know, brand the label within the city of Atlanta as well as within the music industry. So I thought, you know, at least let me just go for it and see if I can get my foot in the door. So he set up the interview, and, you know, I was very prepared. I went in there, I did my homework and research on what those guys had produced so that I, you know, could be able to have a conversation with them. And I got the job. I got hired as promotions director 4 months after graduating from SU, making $30,000 a year. I thought I was rich. So needless to say, 4 months after that, I moved out of my mom's house, bought my first car, and I was well on my way and never looked back. The first artist that I got to work was a group called Outcasts. The first song was Players Ball. And it was actually, a lot of people don't remember that Players Ball was actually on the Christmas album that we released at LaFace. It wasn't even a part of, you know, their original album, Southern Playalistic, that they had put together. And because that record had done so well, we decided to put it on their first album. I also hit the road with Toni Braxton. She was on tour with a group called Frankie Beverly and Maze at the time, and so my responsibility on the tours was to go out in each venue, find a room so that we could have a meet and greet where program directors and music directors and contest winners could come and meet Toni. So I was the one setting up the room, making sure the photographer was there, making sure everyone got to meet Toni and that she was on stage, you know, by a certain time. So those were all incredible opportunities for me. I couldn't believe that I was working with these type of artists right out of college. It was a real blessing. And so I did promotions probably for about 3 years, 3.5 years. I also went on tour with Usher. We did every hole-in-the-wall club imaginable because when he first started out, as you know, he was this little young kid who was just, you know, getting his feet wet and getting out there. So we had to do a lot of promotion and work to build his career. And then the summer of '95, I actually went on tour with TLC. And it was their Crazy Sexy Cool tour. I slept on the bottom bunk. It was cold. It was sleepless nights, but we had a lot of fun, and that was actually one of their most successful albums, so that was an amazing experience for me. And so I spent a lot of time also in the clubs. You know, the workday didn't end for me at 7 o'clock. Afterwards, I would have to, you know, do dinners or go to showcases or go to the clubs. And back then, you know, we were still passing out 12 inches and CDs. So I did anything and everything that I could. Went to the studio to spend time to get to know the artists. So I really made the most of it, and I did that till probably '96. And then I decided I want to do something a little bit different within the company. And marketing and promotions go hand in hand. So there was a position becoming available on the marketing side, and I decided to move over to marketing. So I did that for 3 years and got a chance to continue to work with Goody Mob and Donnell Jones. We actually signed Pink back when I was at LaFace, but she was in a 3-girl group called Choice. And I'll never forget, we had a showcase, and that was really their moment for the label to kind of look at them and critique, you know, the band, and for us to give our feedback to LA. And it was almost like a no-brainer. Everybody kind of looked at themselves like, they're good, but she's the star. So a couple weeks after that, unfortunately, they dropped the other young ladies, and Pink became a solo artist, and the rest is history with that.